these 5 reasons of why you're struggling with consistency around shift work. And they may not be what you think. First YouTube, boys. First YouTube. If you are a police officer, other first responder, and you struggle with your consistency with training around shift, then this video is for you. I'll start with a little bit of context. So when I was in the police, my training was very sporadic, and it was largely because I just didn't know what I was doing. I knew I wanted to train to perform on shift, but I was stuck with my bro split I've been doing for the last 6 years and didn't really have any other idea of what training could look like. And whilst my training was very poor and not suited for the role, it wasn't because I didn't care, but it was just a lack of education. And the nature of shift work just meant that I found it impossible to form any sort of routine around it, and everything became very reactive, whether it was my training, my nutrition. Most sets I'd be off late, and then I'd just be fatigued. And if you work in the police, fire, ambulance, you'll know that feeling, where it feels like your shifts just take over your life. And there's no room for anything in between that for yourself. But I think what made it worse is that when I found my routine again, and I felt like I got back in a rhythm, it felt 3 times as hard and felt like I was starting from scratch, which I think a lot of people struggle with. We're trying to gain consistency again with your training and getting a good routine because you know that you need to, but it just feels impossible. And then you'll fall off, and then you repeat the cycle over and over again. So the point of the video, why do I feel that shift workers struggle so much with consistency around shift work? And I've put it down to 5 reasons. Number 1 is that you're trying to build a routine around a job that has no routine. Now, if you're working a 9 to 5, it's much easier to look at your week and have a very structured system when it came to training. Because what you know is that your week looks identical every single week. But the thing is that yours doesn't. The nature of shift work, you're working late, you're working nights, you're off late, probably most of your shifts. You could be called in on rest days. It's extremely sporadic. And then before you know it, your rest days are over and then you're back into the set again. You can't build a rigid structure around something that can be so chaotic. Because as the saying goes, rigid things break and the chaos of set takes over, and all of a sudden your training week's out the window, and then you're looking for the I'll start again Monday. Number 2, an extremely common one I'll see, is that you're waiting to feel ready. Now, in all honesty, this is something that got me for a while, waiting to feel more rested, wait until work settles down. The list is endless of excuses that we can put in this category. But the reality is when does it ever settle down? And the longer that you're pushing off and waiting for these perfect conditions, it's just the longer we're delaying that start point, and the bigger that gap becomes between where you want to be and where you are currently, which then in turn makes it feel a lot more unachievable, dependent on the time that you spend in this mindset. Number 3 is that your training has no structure or direction. The biggest thing I see is people jumping from one PDF to the next, or saving sessions that they see on Instagram and then just doing that the next day. There's no tracking, there's no structure behind the session, there's no intent, and then there's no direction with where that training is going. So it becomes a very reactive process, where the gauge of success is, am I sweating and do I feel like I've done a session? And I think the bit that doesn't get spoken about with this enough is that when a session program feels aimless, or training in general feels aimless at a time, it becomes much easier to not do that session, because there's not the buy-in to that process, especially if you're in that place where you're going to the gym, you turn up on the day, and then you just decide what you're going to do in that very moment. These are all things that just create barriers that when it's tough to get in, which it will be with the nature of your role, it just makes it much easier to not go and do. Number 4 is fatigue, winning that mental argument every time. Now, what is much easier around set on rest days, which I think we've all fallen victim to, is sitting on Netflix or doom scrolling instead of just getting up and going and training. And I think it's important that we ask ourselves the question, is it mental fatigue or is it physical fatigue? 2 separate things, which I will do a breakdown video in more depth. But the reality is, if we use fatigue as a reason not to train, training will become very sporadic. The nature of the role, fatigue comes with it. There's things that can be put in place to make sure that you keep moving the needle forward, which I will get into in more detail shortly. And then number 5, which is probably the biggest one that I do see, is the all or nothing mentality. I think the biggest problem is people on shift, they know they want to make a change. They may have been in that process of waiting for that perfect time, or they may have gone to a call and recognized the change that they need to make. Very commonly what I'll see is people going 0 to 100 on training, nutrition immediately. Now, I think this is one we can all relate to. You decide enough's enough, you flip the switch and you go all in. New training plan, new diet, no days off, and the locking in mentality kicks in. And don't get me wrong, for a few weeks, you could probably stick with that intensity, but it's not sustainable. And this is the problem that I see, is that people will last around 4 weeks with this locking in mentality, and then they'll fall off because it's impossible to sustain around shift, probably not fueling enough on calorie, training too hard and too often, or not taking into account things like stress, fatigue. And it gets to that point where you just can't continue. So you end up stopping 4 weeks in, and then all of a sudden you're returning to the same habits that kept you in this cycle of not getting to your goals with training. But with it being the first YouTube, I don't want it to all be negative. So we're going to give some of the solutions to these problems. So first, stop reacting on the day and start planning ahead. Instead of looking at, do I train today or can I train today? Start planning your week ahead and look at days that you know are achievable, whether it's around childcare, shift work, that you can go in and dedicate to training. Now this could be before afternoons. Some people can train before days, some people before nights. Whatever you find works best with you and you can get the most out of, plan ahead, protect these days, set them as your training days, and then fit everything else in around that. So the solution to point 2 and 3 really is having a plan and clear direction with what you're doing in the gym and why. Have something ready before you go in. Make sure it's a progressive plan that's built around you, your lifestyle, that's going to get you to your goals, whatever they may be. But turning up and just having something to follow gives you one less plate to spin whilst you're on shift and all the other things going on in life. But it gives that clear direction and purpose with what you're doing and why you're doing it. Point 4, training around fatigue. A couple of things that I'll look at. Can we afford to move the session to another day to get the most out of it? Now, if yes, then move it, pour your efforts into it on that day. Now, if we can't, then what we can look to do is reduce intensity of the session. Now, you can do this by bringing down reps, sets, overall time that you're in the gym. Pour your efforts into the main focus of the session, get what you need out of it. More importantly, you're still ticking the box, you're moving the needle forward, but you're keeping yourself in the habit of going. And number 5, when we address the all or nothing mentality, the biggest thing I would say is start slow and build progressively. Instead of that 0 to 100, training 5-6 days a week, cutting all treats from your diet, and then eating broccoli and rice from a Tupperware for the next 4 weeks before it becomes too much because it's unsustainable, start slow. If you haven't trained for the last 3-4 months, start by doing 1 or 2 sessions in the gym. Focus on getting out and hitting 8 to 10k steps daily on a walk. With your food, just begin by tracking calories. Become aware of what you're consuming, because over time then, you can start eating to a calorie goal that suits what you want out of training. If you want to lose weight, start eating to a deficit. If you want to gain weight, start eating a surplus. You may want to maintain weight, eat at your maintenance weight. But those things can be refined over time. But that approach ensures that you're not setting the bar too high and unachievable, so that within that 4-week window then you feel like you've failed because it's unsustainable, and then you're back to square one again. Consistency when you work shifts isn't about motivation. It's tapping into a deeper why. It's about having a structured plan. It's about recognizing that for your role, from a stress relief standpoint to physical readiness, that you need to be training. And it's making something sustainable that ensures that you can keep doing that around the chaos of your job. So if you feel like this resonates with you, then subscribe, because I'm going to be putting out more in-depth videos on how you can train to perform at your best when you're out on shift. So I'll see you in the next one.